How did y'all find object-oriented programming? Let me open the chat. Yeah, it was good. Alrighty. Cool. So to start out with, I have first off, I have an implementation of each up here because I'm going to be using each. I'm actually going to just make that each without the underscore. I've got an array called range, and then an example use of reduce where we just sum up all the numbers in range. And what we expect is that that sum is going to be equal to 15 at the end of this. So now I'm going to implement reduce to see how that works. All right. So we know that reduce is going to take a collection and a callback function, which I'm going to call the iterator. And it potentially takes a start value. If the start value is not provided, we want the start value to be set equal to the first value. So in the instance of sum, it gets set value to 1 in the first iteration. And then we don't call 1 with the iterator. So I'm going to use each. I'm going to use each to iterate over the collection. And then I'm going to provide each. Each gives us access to the current item, its index, and also the entire collection. In my building of reduce, I'm going to go ahead and repeat that just so that in later uses of reduce, I will have access to all of those arguments if I want them. So we need to see, we know that if there's a start value, we're going to do some code. Else, do some other code. So how do we find out if this start value is there? There are different ways that it's possible. The way that I'm going to choose to do this is to measure the length of my collection's argument. If you remember, or arguments object, I'm sorry, the length of the function's arguments object. If you remember, arguments is a reserved keyword. It's an object that every function has access to when you call the function. It's an object that contains all of the arguments that get passed in. So if I pass in like an extra value for some reason when I call this, the length of arguments is going to be 4. If I pass in start value, so collection, iterator, and start value, the length of the arguments is going to be 3. So what I'm going to say is set it equal to start. And I'm going to say if arguments.length is equal to 2. So if we only have 2 arguments, meaning we'll call this no start value. If we only have 2 arguments and no start value, if no start value, do some code. Else, what do we want to do? We want to call our iterator function with our accumulator. Remember, the callback to reduce takes an accumulator and then the current value. So we'll call it with accumulator, and item. And then each time we call it, whatever the iterator returns, we set accumulator equal to iterator. So right now, we don't have an accumulator. And since start value will eventually become our accumulator, I'm actually going to replace this to say accumulator. So now, if someone provides a start value, then when starting out, accumulator is already going to be equal to start value. But if there is no start value, what we'll do in the first iteration is set accumulator equal to our first item, to the current item in the first iteration. And then we'll set no start value equal to false, so that when we come back around, it's going to jump over this if and go straight into the else. And once we know that we've assigned the accumulator and there's some value for the accumulator, again, each time we're going to say accumulator is equal to the results of calling our iterator function with the current value of accumulator and the value of the current item. And then we will, oh, and I guess, trying to think. Well, and then we will return accumulator. Now that I'm thinking about this, the way I have it constructed, we actually won't have access to index and collection. I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. I'm just going to leave, I'm going to leave it so the iterator only has access to accumulator and the current item. All right, so now let's move this example usage down and find out if it works. Looks like it didn't. Oh, arguments, not argument. And I think I spelled accumulator. What did I do wrong?
You've got your cursor on it right now, Zan.
Oh, I need an A right there. Thank you. All right, let's see if that's hopefully the last syntax error.
It's the spelling of accumulator.
Did I get that right now? I'm just going to copy and paste it from somewhere else to make sure I don't have it misspelled. And I misspelled it down here too. Okay, cool. Now that we have made all of the accumulators have the correct spelling, reduce is in fact working as we expect. And I see that there were people giving me hints to my misspelling again in the chat, and I missed it. Thanks for your efforts anyway. So does anyone have any questions about that implementation of reduce? All right. I'm going to, in that case, go ahead and ping the channel and tell everyone to come in for a wrap up. If you have any questions, you can still continue to ask them. Yes. I will post it in Slack, Yancy, in the main channel. I'll also post this recording to the whiteboard. Yeah, no problem. I actually think, go ahead and stop recording.